Right, go on, Dave. Tell us your name.
So, Dave Brind, born 1955. So, at my age of 17, it would have been around 1972, 1973. I'm very interested in theatre, but very much someone who was ensconced in a very white middle-class town in Tenterden in Kent, which was lovely place to be brought up, on the council estate. But equally, it was a very white-based town. There were very few black people in Tenterden, even though we were only 50 miles away from London. And I do remember, as a couple of years later went on, and I was working in a theatre in Kent at Small Hythe called the Barn Theatre, a beautiful little theatre. We often thumbed lifts. You don't do it nowadays. It's just not done. People get very wary. It's very dangerous. But we used to thumb everywhere, particularly in the countryside. If you didn't drive, you thumbed everywhere. So I remember thumbing from my town down to this theatre, which was not a great distance, about 2.5, 3 miles. Sometimes I'd walk it. Sometimes, if I felt tired at the end of the day after working in the pub, I would go and thumb. And I remember being picked up, someone stopping, being picked up, and it was a black man in the car, and we just struck up a conversation about theatre. And then I said, and I must have looked a bit shocked, where do you work? And he said, I'm your librarian in Tenterden. He was a librarian in the town. And I said, that must be quite an interesting job. He said, it shocks a lot of people. It shocked a lot of people because it was a very white
What was he
town
doing there?
He was a librarian. He wasn't the chief librarian, but I suppose you would call him an assistant librarian at that time. But it just told me at that time that we weren't that much in touch with people of black people in Kent in that sense. Now, when I shift then to college and we go to Croydon, South London, now we're talking a different game.
Yeah.
And now I am a few years on from that 72 period. And so I'm hitting around the 18, 19, 20-year-old. And we are now immersed with students that come from white South African students. We got some from Norway. We'd also got some from Nigeria. Also from the kind of Congo area, as it would have been.
And what you were student as?
And they were students were great. They were working in theatre design, which is what our course was.
Okay.
So we were looking at lots of different shows in town. We were only a stone's throw from London. So it was a very interesting mix of students. And I have to say, a bit of a shock to the system, but they were fantastic.
Why was it a shock to the system, Dave?
I think probably because I come from such a white middle-class town that had little exposure, other than news and articles, and music, of course. Motown was big, 60s, going through into the 70s, but actually meeting black people and talking to black people. And so talking to black students was a revelation.
No, you can't just say that as a word. You've got to try and tell me why it's a revelation. What does that mean?
I think part of it was that you get a kind of stereotype that you would hear from on the news, and actually talking to people about a subject that you love. Now, I love theatre, and I loved art, but the theatre was the range. That's why I was working on that course, was to do theatre work, not in terms of acting, although we'd done a small bit with amateur works, but was to do with the backstage, was to do with working in the artistic side of putting a show on. So I was very interested in scene painting, which is where I spent a lot of my professional time, first 15 years professionally, working in the West End and then at the Library Theatre up here in Manchester. So talking to students about theatre was one, but talking to students that come from another country about what their theatre experiences were like and what their expectations were quite extraordinary. And also talking to white South Africans. We knew about apartheid, we knew what troubles that was causing. And again, if we're talking 60s, 70s, and we're talking cases like Steve Biko that were coming up, that the politics was quite tricky. Then we get into my second year at Croydon, and we're beginning to see the era of punk coming up. So we're talking around that summer of 1976, that very hot summer that a lot of people remember, and into 77. And the south of London is very turbulent at that time. The thing that's a bit of background, certainly to the Rock Against Racism, which we got involved in by going to a place called the Albany. You'll hear me mention the Albany a number of times.
This is your club.
This was the club that was in Deptford in South London. Was really a quite lively place, and a real mixture of white and black and everything in between. So 76 saw two things happen that really upset a lot of people, and hence where Rock Against Racism comes out. So we see a real kind of drunken rant by Eric Clapton about racism, and he really is... he's very apologetic about it now, but at the time, August in Birmingham, he gives a real rant and almost bases some of his ranting back to Enoch Powell's River of Blood speech in 1968. And Clapton really upsets an enormous amount of people. One, that admire him for his work, but two, that they can't believe what he's actually saying. And there's another iconic pop star who also comes out about fascism and suggests that there should be a fascist leader in this country, and that's David Bowie.
Really?
And the two of them, at roughly the same time, around this 1976 period, Bowie again says that he was off his head with cocaine, that he was in a really bad way. But at the time, the two of them say things that are really horrible, and others say disgusting. And a lot of writers and journalists and NME, the musical magazine, are coming out and saying this is outrageous. And Rock Against Racism comes out as a rock against racism. So
against them in particular.
Well, in a sense, it does come from a reaction against them, against the two of them, because they are so sort of established in music, and they're using the stage as a vehicle for actually putting over some of their ideas. They both deny it at the end, and they both apologise for it in the end. But it's set.
I've got some questions.
It set the scene for Rock Against Racism coming about from a photographer.
How long?
Called Saunders.
How long does it take them before they apologise?
It took them a while.
Years, months, weeks.
I think you'd have to say that the probably initial reaction would have gone into months, but in later reflection, they say how bad their own particular lives were and how sort of alcohol-led and drug-led that they were both realising they were saying the wrong things.
What in your opinion is affecting them in politics, in life in general, to say them things?
Bowie's interesting because he says things at the time. He says things like it takes almost like the right wing to clean up our act, and you can read that into whatever way you want. Clapton is much more. He's much more voiceful about I don't like wogs in our country.
Wow.
And coons should go home. I'm sorry about the language, but that's what was said.
That's fine. I don't know nothing about this, Dave.
It's really upsetting at that time. Now, I have to qualify it with saying that they profusely apologised afterwards.
And Bowie's with your man.
You know? Yeah. I mean, and we love the music of Bowie, and we love the music of Clapton. And it's interesting that the commentators started coming out because one of Clapton's biggest hits was I Shot the Sheriff, which is a Bob Marley song.
Yeah, of course.
So Bob Marley, and the Black Caribbean music that's coming out again at that time, this 70s, real mid-70s energy of music. It's Clapton's actually picking up on black music, and he's doing okay out of that. So I mean, I Shot the Sheriff was one of his big standalone hits of the time.
Is he Perfect Day?
Say again.
Is he Perfect Day?
No.
Who's that?
No, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
But something must be. They must be playing to something though.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? There must be something in a crowd that they're playing to say those things.
Yeah, and I think that the politics of the time.
Right.
So we've got the which is then the backlash.
Yeah.
That happens with. So you've got Rock Against Racism.
Yeah.
And the Albany, this Deptford club.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the Albany.
In there.
Go on.
So I'll take a bit about the Albany, and then I'll go back to the music on that. But the Albany, okay, so. In Deptford, there's a pub called, it's changed its name now. It's something like the Bird's Nest, but it was called the Oxford Arms. It was a kind of dockers pub in Deptford. Deptford being a great shipbuilding area of South London, not far from Greenwich. You talk about Cutty Sark. You talk about Drake's Hinds, the Golden Hind.
I know where we are now.
About enormous shipbuilding history. And so Deptford was a real dockers area at one point. And the Oxford Arms went back some way. So there would have been dockers from all nationalities that would have gone in to the Oxford Arms. And we know as students, as art students, we're not a stone's throw away from Goldsmiths College, so students going in there from there, and from Camberwell as well. And we were a bunch coming up from South London from Croydon College, and we would meet in the Oxford and mix with black drinkers and black activists. The Oxford Arms was very much a socialist worker grouping pub. It was very left wing. It had affiliations with the union movements, trade union movements. Yeah. And at the time, there is a strike at Grumwicks, which is a strike of pretty heavy political significance. It went on for 2 years. There was a lot of fighting.
So who's Grumwicks and why is it possible?
So Grumwicks was, if memory serves right, was a photographic laboratory and processing plant. Okay. And there were a lot of Indian workers, and it was about workers' rights, payment, etc., and treatment of the workers. And it seemed very unfair, and the trade unions really wanted to get behind the workers. It's a complicated affair, but effectively it became a left and right clash.
God, I forgot about politics like this, Dave.
It's just so much of what was going on there.
Proper trade unions
and it's the bit that I kind of think drove some of us towards, and certainly as the Rock Against Racism came out, because the other chunk that is going on, and certainly in South London, and you sort of head towards the Lewisham riots, was the re-emergence or the emergence of the National Front. So you had the left side, if you like, of a more community-based politics, social community, the idea that people should mix together and work together. And the other side of it is the National Front, run by, at that point, a chap called Martin Webster, who was a pretty difficult character, very hard.
And is this all in the same area?
And this is all in that same area. And the Lewisham riots were, I suppose, Deptford runs into Lewisham, all that part of South London. I was living at the time a place called Healy Fields in Brockley, which is just north of Lewisham and in between Deptford and Lewisham. Right. So we knew this area really quite well. Not for ages, but for about 2 years. Lively with the music. Oh, I turned my radio off, sorry. Lively with the music, but lively also with the fact that there was this clash between left and right. And then the Oxford Arms is a pub that we would have a drink at and talk all sorts, and then go on to the Albany for the music. And that's exactly that point and time when the backlash against the established rock masters became Rock Against Racism, and then all these events start happening across the country. It's not just in London, but across the country. The East End in particular, I think, holds the first Rock Against Racism gig in a pub in East London.
Got questions?
Yeah.
What you said, you talk about all sorts in the pub. Yeah, so you're 20 now.
So I'm 19, 20.
Yeah.
I'm with a bunch of theatre students.
Yeah.
But we're also talking to other students that are coming from art college as well.
Yeah.
We felt very comfortable in that pub. A certain number of us felt very comfortable in that pub. One or two in particular people, I should name names that you won't mean anything to you.
Yeah.
But one or two in particular, like Leslie and Stephanie, were very much into opening our eyes about different types of music.
Yeah.
So punk, rock, jazz. I wasn't enormously musical myself.
Yeah.
But we did, with the punk era, of course, was coming up, and there was a lot of energy about that in London, South London, even Croydon, where the college was. There was a lot going on.
And then you go to the Albany, and what's
so we
the
go to the
music
Albany,
in there?
and the Albany there was the gigs that we went to, and I didn't go to an enormous amount. I probably went to about 4, 5, and they were very much involved, and the ones we went to were very much involved in the Rock Against Racism, because the pub that we felt comfortable in often got attacked by the National Front.
Really?
And
so this Oxford pub, the name of the pub, tell me the name.
Oxford Arms.
So this Oxford Arms is getting attacked by the National Front.
Yes, very much so.
So what does that mean? What does attack mean? They just come through the door?
And it leads to tragedy in the end at the Albany. But some of this is alleged, I have to say that, for legal sense, but alleged, is that you get the stones thrown, you get people getting beaten up locally.
Because you shouldn't be mixing.
Yeah. But also because the National Front against black people as well. So this was going on, and so the Albany became quite a centre of people mixing white and black together to listen to music, and that was the big current of it, was music getting you through and getting the message over, not fighting. Well, in 78, travelling on a year on, the Albany is fired and bombed and destroyed by fire. And there's a horrible note, allegedly, that comes in through the what's left of the door the day after, and this is August 78, is that we got you.
Oh.
And it's pretty sure that it was it's definitely right wing.
Right, you've got to slow the story down. Right, so, hold on a minute, Dave, right? So you're in the pub. How many of you are your friends? Say there's 10, 5, 6?
There were probably, on a regularish basis, about half a dozen. So that I went with fairly regular from the college up. Because we lived close to the area, so college in Croydon, close to the area in Lewisham. Friends who lived it's an area surrounded by council estates. And so there were friends that we met on that council estate and would have an early drink. This is not late night.
Yeah.
This is 7, 8 o'clock at night. Yeah. This is not midnight onwards. And this is going for a drink and then going back home for 9, 10 o'clock.
And while you're in the pub, so there's half a dozen of you, I presume is the pub a full pub?
The pub is a full pub. The pub is not so much as the pubs we know today, but it's got a snug, it's got a saloon,
it's a proper pub.
It's a proper pub.
Yeah.
And you
so you're just minding your own business?
Well, you just go there for a drink. And it's known as a meeting place for socialist working party.
Okay.
So it's a very local pub for local people. A lot of folks are coming from the council estates.
So ordinary people who are not social working party people.
The working folks.
Yeah.
At that point, there would have just been a smattering of people working on the docks. Only just, because the docks are disappearing. The docks are going.
So yous are in there, because I know the kind of pub you mean, and you're all kind of mingling, and I presume you've got long hair.
Yeah, we're all
you've got a certain look.
Art students. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, so
we look a little different.
Yeah, so there's this divide anyway between yous lot and your ordinary working people, but they're taking no notice of you, and
but
you're taking
no
notice of them.
Yeah, I think partly because most of the folks in there are agreeing with the same sort of point of view.
Yeah.
And that has to be something that's swung to the left.
Yeah.
It wasn't to the right.
Are they mingling with you when they've had a drink?
Oh, the black people and us mingled all the time.
Yeah.
And it always made me smile. You'd hear a big slap on the table from the snug area where they were playing dominoes.
Yeah.
And some of the much older black men were playing dominoes. And you'd hear this slapping down all the time. They love playing their dominoes.
So now put me in the head of the NF. So they're in there. Where's their pub?
They're around all different parts of South London, and I have to be careful. You have Millwall as a football club, and that's got did have quite a reputation for some quite hard thinking.
It did have football thugs as well.
There were pubs, I think, in Lewisham as well, and also pubs in the East End of London, which is not that far away and across the other side of the river. So
they decide.
The stomping ground for a lot of people that would have had, let's say, that more right-wing feel, came from the East End, came from that South London area.
So how do they get from their pub to your pub?
Well, this is when you start to look at what happens at the Lewisham riots.
Yeah.
Lewisham riots happens in 78, August 78. This is roughly the time that the Albany's had gone down. Mm. And at the time, more left-wing thinking people were saying that the police was biased. The police was very biased towards protecting that more right-wing feel. Okay. I have to be careful what I say because it's about facts and it's about detail. But definitely the feeling was that the police were more sympathetic towards the right wing than they were to the left. That's being diplomatic. So it comes to a point where the National Front gather and they want to march through South London. They want to march into Lewisham. Okay. And then,
to do what, Dave? And to march into Lewisham to do what?
They're doing it to wind the local communities up. Okay. They're doing it because they know that the black communities are really upset. There had been a series of muggings that have been going on over a period of time that had all been totally and utterly blamed on the black people around there. And the National Front used that for the muggers. They call it, we don't want the muggers to be in our territory. And so they are allowed to walk from, I'm going to say from the sort of Camberwell area, but into Lewisham. And there's a big backlash. And there's a lot of police cordons. And there's a lot of sort of trying to guide people down certain streets. And there is a breakout. There's a breakout through the police lines. There is a riot, and it's really quite nasty. There is apparently the figures that came out afterwards was something like over 100 people were injured. 50% of that, over 50, were police. And then there was something like 200 arrests. And the majority of those arrests, you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
And the Lewisham riot, I think, did sort of put into the news that there were some serious problems going on with the National Front. And the way that the National Front were behaving, the way that the National Front were, if you like, being allowed to perform their marches and their protests as they did.
So when they come to your pub, is that splinter groups? Is this part of the bigger group? Who's coming?
I suppose in a sense the pub where we're at, the Oxford Arms where we're at, would get the odd bit of graffiti. They get the odd smash window. They would get that kind of thing. They didn't firebomb it, certainly not to my knowledge, in those 2 or 3 years down there. But the Albany did get firebombed.
So tell me about that now.
So what apparently people knew about it was that there'd been various gigs going on. There'd been Rock Against Racism gigs going on. And then in the August of 78, and this is around this time of those Lewisham riots, there was, to me, pretty clearly a decision to get the Albany out of action. And they do it. It is burnt to the ground. It's a shell of a building, and eventually it does, but it does raise itself up. And it was partly known as the Albany Empire. It had been a place that had been established for local people and communities about 1899, a long time. It sort of became much more musical in the 60s, 70s. A lot of punk groups had gone down there and to play through that we knew of. There have been other groups as well. So what happens is they actually get funds together, they put a group together and they rebuild it, and it's actually reopened in 1981. It's actually opened by Princess Diana.
Okay.
It's now thriving. It's an area that is
But
an
go
arts
back
area.
to how it gets burnt down.
So as what we know is it's burnt down, is that I think around this time of the riots, there is such animosity that's going on. And they know that the Albany is a place for rock against racism. They know that the music is doing very well. They know that, I think what upsets the right wing, if you like, more, is the mixture of white and black mixing together and enjoying music and for fundraising for various events around the community. And I don't think they can stand that. And it obviously had its troubles before and had been attacked and there had been graffiti, etc. in the old building. But to go to the point of actually firing it and arson.
What time did he burn it?
In terms of time of the day, it would have been night. And
because I'm interested, are they intending to murder people?
No, as my understanding is that wasn't the intention at all. My understanding is that it was to burn it out of action.
Right.
And I think it's a nighttime fire. As far as I understand, it's a nighttime fire. And I think the point was of the note going through afterwards, gotcha, is that they've obviously been planning this for some time. There is a backlash. I think that's a serious point, that other people have lost their lives, which I don't know the detail of too much, but I know on Deptford Road there have been 1 or 2 house fires where people had lost their lives. Black people had lost their lives.
Is that the famous 13?
The 13 go in one. There's another party where there's another fire, and I think another couple.
And are these in the same area?
These are all around the same area. They're all around this same time, around this sort of 77, 78 period. And it is quite turbulent. I keep using that word, but it was. I mean, you had to watch yourself. If you wore your Rock Against Racism badge, you knew you were marking yourself.
Yeah, you were a target.
You were a target. And it's the round badge with the red star with the Rock Against Racism. Yeah. And I know my wife, Bridge, still got her original badge. So from the times we met a number of times and went to the Albany. There's another place called the Galleon, which was further up into town. That was also quite a lively place. But the Albany is the one that mixed black and white together in a good way. What
music are you listening to? You keep mentioning punk, but what music? As mixed together, what music
mostly. I mean, obviously there's a lot of Bob Marley that was on the go. There was Motown sounds as well. Yeah. We listened to a bit of J.J. Cale, which was American guitarist well. Yeah. And Aretha Franklin was on. Even the popular stuff like Hot Chocolate was going. And so we would listen to that. We were listening to Bowie. At college, we listened to Bowie. And part of it was putting this together about this tirade from him.
But he's such an idol and so cool.
Just touching a nerve. Yeah. Because things like Man Who Fell to Earth, the film, was just coming out around that time. Yeah. He's very popular, indeed.
Absolutely. He's like the man at the time.
He's a man who's born in Brixton. Yeah. He's born in South London.
I didn't know he'd said all them things.
He was actually a Croydon art student for a while. At the art college, so this is a person who knows his South London very well. So it was, but I have to say that he did really apologise about what he said and how he fell into it, and that this was a period when it was a disaster for him. He talks about it being an absolute disaster for him. So I've got to say that. I've got to
yeah, no, of course.
But what is interesting that those two characters, heavily into the rock world at that time, with Clapton and Bowie, are real conduits for the rock against racism movement that comes up. And I think that it goes on to about the early 80s. We shifted
rock against racism.
Yeah, we shifted away then. We've left college. We're out of it. We're doing other things. 78 into early 79. So it's an area that I've rarely been back to.
Right.
I've rarely been back to Deptford. Probably a handful of times. See one or two friends that was in the early 80s, and then they moved away to do work into different areas. So Deptford became a place that I sort of probably shifted away from seriously in about 1981.
Do you know what's really weird, what you're saying, Dave? I don't remember racism being so strong. It must have been.
It was horrendous.
Yeah.
It was very much a part of that culture. Well, we knew it was ingrained in certain parts of the country, but in South London in particular, it was definitely there. And the Lewisham riots, if you ever read about Lewisham riots, and now, because of history, because of the way that people write, because of trying to get the balance right, if you'd read about it on the paper the day after, it would all have been about anti-black.
Tell me what you mean. You mean it's their fault?
Yeah, exactly. Their fault.
They did the mugging in the first place.
They did the mugging, and I'm not saying it wasn't going on.
Yeah.
But it would be a biased and unbalanced view. Read it now, and you get the facts and the figures and what was really going on, and the way that history sort of does actually get a clearer picture.
I want to ask a really stupid question, but
I'll answer it if I can.
Yeah. So what did your club do to you? Right, you know, like your club has a lasting effect on you, doesn't it, at that age? What did that do to you? What do you think your lasting effect is?
College was busy. Yeah. So it wasn't a place that I went to all of the time. But when we did go there, it was really friendly, and it opened your eyes up to talking to people that you wouldn't normally mix with in a different way. And it was music that did it. It was, we were into the punk. So when we knew there was a punk gig going on, I was saying to a couple of the colleagues this morning, the idea, I can't believe it now, of me pogoing, doing the jumping up and down punk stuff with other
get you to end the
black
video
friends
doing that,
and friends from college was quite extraordinary. And I sort of look back and think, did I really do that? But we did. There was a real energy about the music, and certainly the punk scene itself wasn't everyone's favourite.
No, it's not mine. It's absolutely not mine.
Black, but it's the bit of music at the time that I do remember. As I say, there was the Bob Marley music was there without a doubt, and there would have been other black musicians and black music that we don't know, and I would have forgotten. I wouldn't remember, but it was a friendly place, and it was very much. And I think this is the drawing point of it. It was steeped in politics. It was left wing, and it was that I think was the bit where we felt comfortable with. It was political. There was no doubt you couldn't divorce that political side from it. Exactly the point, as I said, with Rock Against Racism, you couldn't divorce that point of points of view between left and right. And I think we just felt comfortable in the Oxford Arms because it was a meeting place of left-wing people, thinking people, and equally with the Albany as well. Other people might have a different feel of what they felt about the Albany. I just felt comfortable with the people we went with, how it felt. It wasn't a massive part of my life at the time. College was really busy. We were involved in lots of different projects. But in terms of relaxing and going up, certainly 76, 77 and into 78, it was a nice place to go. It was an okay place to be. It was different. It was lively. It was energetic. It was all right. It was different from your regular pub. Different from the pubs that I'd known in Kent. My God, it was a million miles away.
Why? What's happening in Kent?
So Kent would be very nice saloons and 16th century beamed pubs that I was brought up from. And so very middle class, very the kind of place where the Masons would meet before they go for their town hall meetings. Lovely old pub that I knew really well called the Woolpack. 16th century coach house, local politicians, etc., meeting in there for their gin and tonics before they go up to their council meetings and their speeches and all the rest of it. So it was different.
So the place is actually punk then? To your way of thinking, the place is actually
I mean,
punk
when you think
well.
of punk and the era of it when it was coming out, and as college students you're into music at the time, punk certainly on South London was energetic library. Sex Pistols.
I do like
Clash,
God Save the Queen.
God Save the Queen.
I do like that.
Of course, that's 1977, the Jubilee.
I do like what it's
Jarman's
about.
Jubilee's
and
coming out. The antidote to the Jubilee. All the streets full of bunting. Remember seeing those as you go through South London. Everywhere, not just South London, but all the bunting out. But Jarman, very active in his film coming out. And I think, Sex Pistols. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, before we finish, I want to ask you one thing.
Okay.
Right? What are you remembering about yourself that you totally forgot?
What am I remembering about myself that I totally forgot? When I've been sitting up on the Reno at the exhibition there and reading the timeline and looking at and listening to what people have felt about the Reno, it reminded me I haven't thought about the Albany for some time. And looking at the Reno upstairs took me back to that time.
Oh, sorry, guys.
It's all right. It's all right. Took me back to that time, and took me back to some of these kind of Stephanie, to Bridge being there, to Leslie, other characters that I knew at the college, who I'd sort of not forgotten about completely, but I'd forgotten about were part of that history. From 76 to 79. And the Reno, very much alive in the 70s.
Absolutely, that's my era.
I had no idea about. I didn't know really much about Moss Side. I was much more south. And I just thought, there were other places like the Reno that were doing clubs, get-togethers, etc., that were really important to people. Real important centres. People. It would be brilliant to get someone who knew the Albany, who's a black person, to see what their memories and that would be, because they would, I think, be stronger than mine. Because I was someone who passed in there now and again, but it wasn't a part of my real life. But it was an important place to have been, and I'm glad to have been there. I'm really glad to have gone there, particularly around that time of those riots, when it was a dangerous-ish place to be.
Definitely, you could have been in there the night that it was decided to burn it down.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's totally possible because it's quite lawless, the world then, compared to now.
Yeah. But there was, as my understanding is, there was no injuries, there was no death.
Yeah.
But it didn't survive. But it was reopened. Yeah.
We need to end, don't we?
We do.
With the knock at the door. Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.